right, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to MTM Live. That's Marketing the Magic Live. This is our weekly follow-up live stream discussion. We'll actually be going live or starting the normal show here in a couple minutes. But right now, it's kind of the pre-show time where I work out a few of the kinks that might have crept in. So we'll be getting started in a couple of minutes. In the meantime, you can answer our question of the week on YouTube or Facebook, which is, what is your customer's problem? What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, what is the problem that your customer has that your company solves? So, if you are watching, go ahead and answer that question for us in the comments on the Facebook video or the live chat for the YouTube live stream. And again, we'll be getting started here in just a minute with the regular actual show. And for just a second here, I'm going to take a look and make sure everything appears to be working correctly. And then we'll get started. So that one looks right. And let's see. Actually go live. All right, if you are just joining us on Facebook, that is because I forgot to hit the go live button for Facebook. So I apologize. We'll be getting started in just a moment. Haha, I have found what I needed. All right, so we are officially at 1 o'clock. It is time to get started. Welcome to MTM Live, our weekly follow-up live stream discussion for each week's regular episode of the Marketing the Magic show, in which we discuss a lesson inspired by the Walt Disney theme parks, movies, marketing, and more. Now, this week, we'll actually be discussing the first 5 of Mickey's 10 Commandments for marketing. So we're going to dive into that subject, and then, of course, next week we'll do the second 10s, or the second 5, rather, so 6 through 10. But this week, again, is first 5. Now, I actually debated doing these 2 episodes, this week and next, first, before I did the Importance of Storytelling episode last week. The reason is that the importance of storytelling was kind of more of an abstract concept. It was harder to put into practical terms, especially in a very short period of time. But that topic is foundational to everything that I believe about and do in marketing. So I wanted to start with it, but nonetheless, I'm very excited to get into some of the more practical nuts and bolts aspects of marketing and how Mickey's 10 Commandments can be applied to that. So to give us some context here, the original Mickey's 10 Commandments was actually created by Marty Sklar. If you're a Disney fan, you probably know who Marty Sklar is. He is one of the living Disney legends who worked directly for and with Walt Disney himself. Started in publicity in his early days, I believe, and then by the end of his career, he was the president of Imagineering, or Walt Disney Imagineering, the group responsible for coming up with the amazing innovations and attractions and things that we see and love in the Disney parks. He wrote these 10 Commandments originally, which I discovered in a very large book on Imagineering and the history of Imagineering. It's a great book. I'll see if I can find the name and link it for you somewhere. So I found the 10 Commandments in that book, and it immediately struck me how applicable those 10 Commandments are to what we do in marketing and in business in general. So I started doing some research and a little bit of digging to see if there was more info out there, and sure enough, there was. There was a wonderful book called One Little Spark, written by Marty Sklar himself. I highly recommend you pick it up. It is an amazing look at the 10 Commandments in depth and how they were used, and sometimes used incorrectly, or misused or not used well enough in Imagineering at Disney. It's an amazing book, and it really began to solidify this idea of how to apply those 10 commandments to marketing. So that's kind of the context. That's what we're talking about. I'm not talking about, always put a smile on your face or anything silly and kiddie like that. These are really, truly practical commandments that we can implement in business and especially in marketing to make our marketing more effective. So let's get right into it. The first commandment, the most important one, is to know your audience. Now, I just said it was the most important commandment on this list, and now I'm going to tell you that I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about it today. And the reason for that is we're going to spend a great deal of time talking about this idea of knowing who your audience is in depth over a number of episodes. And the first one of those will actually be not next week, but the next week. We'll talk about the importance in much more detail of knowing your audience. But the commandment here makes it pretty obvious. We have to know who our audience is in terms of business, who our customer is. Not just somebody who buys our products, but we need to understand that person. We need to understand those ideal buyers, whether those are consumers or decision makers in businesses, depending on what kind of business you operate. We need to do the research and understand who they are, and more importantly, what are the problems that they face that our company solves. We need to understand that problem and the solution and the context around all of it to the core of our very beings before we ever create an advertisement or a brochure or a blog post or whatever it might be that we talk about in marketing. So this idea in terms of Disney let's talk about the theme parks. It goes back to Walt Disney sitting on a park bench watching his girls play or ride a merry-go-round, I believe it was, and wishing that there was a place that families could go to play together. That became the first ideal audience for the Disney parks. Walt Disney wanted to create a place for families who wanted to play together. And that core original idea for an audience is what has propelled the Disney theme parks into legendary status in world business since then, more than 50 years ago. So this is a topic that too many businesses fail to spend enough time on. It's too easy to just go put your product on a shelf and hope that the buyers come beat your door down. It's not really how it works, though. So take the time to know your audience. Now, the second commandment, and this is another one that's often neglected, is to wear your guests' shoes. Wear your guests' shoes. Again, this is often neglected, and it's especially important to me having come from the software development world into the marketing world. If you've ever gone through the process of building a software product, you'll probably have some idea what we're talking about here. You need to experience your product or your marketing to potential customers as if you were those customers. When we're the ones creating the product and creating the marketing to sell the product, it's too easy to assume that our customers are experiencing what we want them to experience. We know the product. We know the message that we're creating and putting out into the world. Our customers don't yet. So when we put this marketing out there, put these products out there without wearing our guests' shoes and experiencing it, looking at it as if we had never heard of this company or this product before, when we do that, we'll oftentimes find out that we're not getting the message across that we intended to. This is absolutely true in the Disney theme parks, and it is absolutely true for marketing. So keep that in mind. Now, the third commandment is to organize the flow of people and ideas. Okay, obviously we want to be organized. There's no question about that. But what Mr. Sklar was actually referring to here was more, in terms of the theme parks, the flow and organization of the parks themselves, so that we have to optimize that to reduce the friction that our customers experience. So think of the Disney theme parks. If you've ever been to one, you know how well laid out these parks are. There's usually a main thoroughfare that leads into a hub area from which you can branch out and go to different themed areas or different attraction areas. The queues for the attractions are well organized and laid out. They're constantly improving those queues to make it less onerous on the guests standing in line. They're always improving the flow of people, of their guests, through the Disney theme parks. And much like wearing our guests' shoes, this is what we can do by wearing our guests' shoes. We can better organize the flow of people through our marketing. Okay? Now that sounds a little wonky, but just think through, in terms of digital marketing especially, think through an advertising campaign. Okay, you're going to have an advertisement, let's say, on Facebook. You're going to have an image and some text and a link that hopefully someone clicks and puts them on a landing page on your website, on which you'll have more pictures and more text that instructs them of what you want to instruct them about. It may be information about your product itself. It may be a video where you discuss their problem in more depth for people earlier in the buyer's journey, which we'll, of course, spend time talking about in future episodes. But there's going to be a point to that landing page, and there's going to be a next step from that landing page. It might be that they submit their name and email address in order to get an ebook, or to schedule a consultation with you, or whatever it might be. And then, once they've submitted that form, it'll take them to a page that says thank you and explains what to expect and when in exchange for them having given you their information. So these are much more complex. This isn't just an ad that gets stuck up on Facebook and something happens or something doesn't. There's a lot of flow. There's a lot of people concerns involved in that process, in that funnel, is what we would call that. So there's enormous opportunity to continually optimize the flow and to organize the flow of the people and the ideas that we want to convey. This is a constantly moving target. Think again of Disney and how they're constantly improving the flow of people through the parks to reduce congestion points and to reduce wait times and to make the line experiences, standing in line for Space Mountain for 3 hours, how they can make that more entertaining by adding different graphical or visual or interactive elements or in-park entertainment. They're always doing things to continually optimize the flow and experience of the people that are moving through the parks. It is a constantly moving target. You can't organize the flow of people and ideas at the very beginning when you launch all of your marketing and then forget about it. Just like we have to test the images, and we have to test the ad copy, and we have to test the landing pages and the forms and the buttons and the email responses and whatever else, everything else, we have to test continually the flow of people through the entire process. Now, the fourth commandment from Mickey is to create a weenie. Ha ha ha. Get the laugh out of your system. It's okay. It's silly. Yes, create a weenie. This was an idea and a phrase coined by Walt himself. And a weenie, or a visual weenie in particular, is something that anchors and orients your audience. So again, think in terms of the Disney theme parks. There is I almost said something I did not mean to say. There is an obvious visual weenie in every single Disney park. These are Cinderella's Castle, the Spaceship Earth ball at Epcot, the Tree of Life at Animal Kingdom, and so on. These are massive structures that visually and spatially anchor the people walking around the Disney theme parks. So at any point, you can look up and see, there's the castle, I know where I am. Now, that's a bit more abstract an idea to apply in marketing, but it's still very applicable. They're still very practical. So in terms of marketing, the weenies that we might create could be the images in a Facebook ad. In terms of Facebook advertising, the image or the video or whatever it is that's the visual meat of the advertisement is the first thing that's going to draw your prospective customer's eye, your audience's eye. That then becomes the visual weenie that is orienting that person. Okay, so in terms of the advertisement itself, they're looking at that advertisement, they see the image. Then when they click on the image, they're taken to a landing page. on which your form usually is going to be the thing that sticks out the most. You'll have other graphics, you'll have text, you'll have other elements on the page, but the form is the point. That's what you want them to focus on. That's how you want them to orient themselves, because that's what tells them what to do next. In a blog post, similarly, it would be the header image at the top of the blog post. Now, the benefit in digital marketing that we have over, say, the Disney theme parks is that we can constantly change out these visual weenies. Once the castle's built, the castle's pretty much built. They might slap a new paint job on it or a temporary decoration or whatever it is, but it's going to be the castle. It's not going to change that much. In marketing, we can constantly test and change these visual anchors to make sure that they're behaving as effectively as they could be. Now, this topic leads directly into the fifth commandment, and the last one we'll be discussing today, which is to communicate with visual literacy. Now, again, this is at face value a somewhat abstract topic. What Mr. Sklar was talking about here was the use of color and texture throughout the theme parks in ways that make sense, that are visually appealing, that orient people to the theme of the area they might be standing in and don't clash with other themes, things like that. In terms of marketing, we can obviously look at things like branding and color selection and things like that, but this is very easily applicable down to the individual campaign level as well. Think again of the advertising funnel that we talked about a few minutes ago. From the Facebook ad onto your landing page and all through that process. We get into terms like message match and things like that here. So this is making logical use of imagery and colors and spacing to keep the person on message, to keep them from saying, wait a minute, I thought I was looking at this, now I'm looking at that. Now, content marketing is actually the best place to talk about communicating with visual literacy. So think of a blog post. Again, you'll usually have a header image that is a visual memory maker, if you will. But within the blog post itself, we talk about the use of headings and subheadings, white space, things that break up this wall of text into something that's more easily digestible and scannable by our audience. So that is definitely a good application of communicating with visual literacy. And of course, we're always going to be looking to and incorporating those visual weenies that we talked about a moment ago. Now, the other major use of communicating with visual literacy is video. You're experiencing that right now. Video is an it's not really emerging anymore, it is a massive movement in marketing at this point, and particularly live video, which is why we're talking to you live today. So if your brand or your client is not already making use of video, think carefully about whether it could, because there is rarely a better opportunity to communicate visually than video itself. So keep that in mind. Now, that is the first 5 commandments, the first 5 of Mickey's 10 commandments, inspired by Marty Sklar's original commandments for Imagineers, as applied to marketing. So, I'm going to take a quick look here and make sure we don't have any questions. I don't see anything at the moment. Is everybody alive? I think so. Wow, Facebook is fussing at me. Okay. So, again, we've talked about the first 5 of Mickey's 10 commandments for marketing. I hope you'll join us next week. We'll have the new episode discussing commandments 6 through 10 coming out on Monday. And then we'll discuss those commandments 6 through 10 on Wednesday in our next edition of MTM Live. I have one other announcement this week. The podcast version of the show, including the audio-only version of these replays, or the replays of the MTM Live show, is now available across the board. We got it onto iTunes this week. It's also available on Stitcher and Google Play, so if you are a podcast listener like me and would prefer to listen to our episodes on the train or in the car, you can certainly do so through our podcast version of the same content. To find all of those podcast links, you can visit marketingthemagic.com, which is still a temporary page. We will hopefully have our new website, new and improved and beautiful and functional, sometime in the next week or so. So, with that, I hope everybody enjoyed the show today, or whenever you happen to watch it. If you have questions or comments, please let us know. We'd love to get your feedback, and we will see you real soon. Thanks.